what is it about the death of a celebrity that causes people to just go insane? You know, take talk that's usually restrictive for quiet coffee time or social media conversation, you know, where anything goes, and slowly raise it into the whole of the subconscious, essentially taking the camera, figurative as it may be in this case, away from the event and directly in front of yourself. 2014, Gene Simmons did this after the suicide death of Robin Williams, stating that Williams had taken the cowardly way out in taking his own life, not taking into account any of the pre-existing history of Robin's depression or any other mental condition, not taking into account any of the news or types of things that had taken place in his life recently, which had caused him to go into an absolute shutdown mode. Really, this was an opinion that was so poorly received that the backlash was almost as catastrophic and cataclysmic as the event itself. That enough should have set a tone of precedent where nobody would really want to take this approach anymore. And of course, when Chris Cornell took his life earlier this year, it was something that was met with universal sadness and something where everybody wished to really show their respects. But we're now mourning the death of Chester Bennington, who was Cornell's friend. And the result has been mainly the same, with one notable exception that has just occurred, and that's by Brian Head Welch. Brian Head Welch, you know who I'm talking about, right? Yeah, the guy who Korn gave to God! That was basically the only piece of news about this guy, aside from, you know, him being a Jesus guy and him coming back to Korn. Whenever you think about Korn, you don't think about Head. You think about Jonathan Davis. And you think about maybe some of the music. You don't think about Brian Head Welch. But now all of a sudden, here's a guy who's thrust back into the spotlight. Principally because his comments about Chester's suicide is that with all of the family, with all of the friends, with all of the children, with all of the fans, with everything that Chester essentially had in his life, let's remove completely from this idea anything else, that this was a cowardly act that should not have taken place. Now, I agree that it shouldn't have taken place. I'm very sad that Chester is no longer with us, but to say that it's cowardly is absolutely absurd, not to mention just as insensitive as Gene Simmons' approach to Robin Williams' suicide. This is something where Brian basically just took that figurative camera away from everybody mourning, put it on himself, said something retarded, and now all of a sudden everybody's talking about Head again. Why? Why is that something that needs to happen? It doesn't, and it shouldn't, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. And it's not going to take very long, because this is almost like apples and oranges, and really, it's almost like there's one last apple in the remainder of the universe, and the rest of us are oranges. So, let's remove everything. Let's strip this down whenever it comes to the idea of Chester, or really any person, taking their own life. Let's completely remove the concept or the notion of mental health problems. Let's remove the idea of health problems in general, whether it be a debilitating disease with no cure. Let's remove the concept of heavy burden, either that or traumatic event, past or present, or something that is coming in the future that causes enough strain or stress or perhaps anxiety in order to potentially give somebody the idea that there is no way out. Let's remove drug addiction. Let's remove chemical addiction or addiction to anything else. Let's remove all forms of harm and will, and there's where you finally get the idea that suicide seems like a really, really silly thing. It could just be that somebody's just tired of living. And really, in this case, it's not that at all. It's the fact that Chester Bennington just had to bury one of his really good friends, Chris Cornell, and happened to commit suicide on what would have been Cornell's birthday. I wonder if he misses his friend. I wonder if this affected him in a way that only few people in this world could potentially understand. I wonder, maybe, just maybe, this sent him into a spiral of depression. Really, to be honest, Chester wasn't seeming like himself this year to begin with. Whenever you consider One More Lights, the band's most recent album for Linkin Park, is something that's so completely different. It was almost like a swan song of sorts. And this is something that really, after this album was released, it was not really caught very quickly, because really a lot of the principal focus was on the music itself and the way in which it was such a diverse, different album. But really, whenever you examine the lyricism, it's definitely a bit of a cry for help. And then whenever you consider what Chester did afterward, where he was attacking those that were saying that the band had sold out with this album, that was something that was out of character as well, because previously, Chester really didn't care. He and the band were famous for saying that they could make an album that sounded like it was heavy metal or sounded like it was Coldplay. They told us in advance of albums such as Minutes to Midnight that the band's sound was going to shift, so why this difference? And it was something that after Corey Taylor intervened and spoke some words, was able to, showcase Chester kind of getting regrounded and refocused a little bit, because he very quickly issued an apology and indicated that Corey was very correct. Something that you don't see from a lot of celebrities unless something really goes bad and the backlash causes them to have to recant their ways to save public face. I don't think this was saving face whatsoever for him. Instead, it was just slowly but surely showcasing the corroding nature of Chester Bennington. Somebody whose lyricism throughout the years, if you re-examine it, certainly showcases somebody who was very close, perhaps to some sort of breakdown, or very close to some sort of destructive behavior. Now, yes, granted, there is a very good point that Brian makes in the fact that Chester did have children, he did have family, he did have a lot of friends, and he did have fans. Those 4 things are very, very correct, and that was 8, but I'm sure he had other things as well. But it's just something where you don't understand what is happening in the mindsets of these individuals. And really, you could have everything in the world. You could have fame. You could have fortune. This has been proven over and over again. One of the most common forms of celebrity death is suicide. There's pressure. Not to mention, if there's already pre-established mental health problems, things that perhaps have been ignored or misdiagnosed or misused for years, then it's something where the brain is going to process things a little bit differently than the rest of the body. The brain of somebody with a mental disorder is going to process things differently than somebody who does not. And really, you could say that all of us get a little blue every so often, but somebody who has depression, anxiety, bipolar, anything like that, it's something that weighs on your conscience. It's something that weighs on your very soul. It weighs on your mind. You never know what somebody else is going through. And that's kind of the bullshit that's here. That's kind of what makes me fume at the freaking ears, because Brian Head Welch basically just 100% walked a bunch of Christians and walked a bunch of God people right back into the spotlight of what is considered to be a little bit of a stereotype. That all you need is God and everything is okay. That all you need is the Lord and you'll see light forever. That anybody who does these things was obviously very, very troubled or had problems and didn't see the light and should have seen the light if only they had been with Jesus. Now I know that that wasn't a context that was necessarily used, but come on, you've heard it and seen it before. You've seen all that crap whenever something happens and people just say prayers, and you think that makes them a good person, or they think that makes them a good person. Who the hell knows? It doesn't make you a good person, it makes you a lazy bastard that can't actually process a cognitive thought of some sort of sorrow or sympathy. Instead, you just have to go immediately to this. Like, this is going to solve the world's problems. Is that going to help his wife cope? Probably not. Is that going to help his kids cope? Probably not. Is that why maybe Brian's angry? Because they have to cope? Probably so. But that doesn't make it right. That doesn't mean that Chester was a coward. That means that Chester was going through a lot of stuff, and maybe he didn't see help on the horizon. Maybe Chester was going through a lot of stuff, and maybe Chester was mourning something. You don't know what can happen on any given night of the damn week. I didn't expect one night to go home from a family event and the next morning wake up in the hospital. I didn't expect that, but it happened. It happened. You never know. Them doing that is not a cowardly act. Sometimes somebody just needs a release. Sometimes that release is death. And it's sad, and it sucks, and this shows, once again, that celebrities, even though they are seen as these godlike figures and figurettes, are just the same as us. We wish that it was some different celebrities that would take their lives. But here's the thing, even if they did, there would be a number of fans and a fan base that would be mourning this Or that death, should I say, just like they do this one. So there is literally no difference. There is literally no difference. You mourn the death of somebody who did this the same way as if it was your cousin, as if it was your mother, as if it was your friend. You don't spout this bullshit. Maybe it's because he's angry, just like I'm angry at him. But one way or the other, this is the wrong opinion. And this doesn't help anything. In fact, if anything, it's more closely tied to a regression than an aid. If you know somebody who's struggling out there, this is my plead to you. I plead of you to sit down and talk with them. Don't say that they need help. You know, they do. I understand that. But sometimes just what they need is just for someone to sit and talk with them. And not about their problems. You can talk to them about the weather. You can talk to them about what ridiculousness Kim Kardashian did this month. You can talk to them about sports. Something that maybe just makes them feel a little bit human. Something that just makes them feel a little bit human, like someone does give a shit. And be honest about it. Don't just fucking fake it. Don't just fake it. Be honest about it. If you care about your friend, be honest about it. Korn gave head to God, and head just gave himself over to a legion of dipshits with his thought process. He made himself look just as stupid as people in the Westboro Baptist Church, or those mega churches that say that the power of prayer defeats everything. And I'm not mocking Christianity with this. I hope that you understand this. I hope that you understand this. I am telling you, plain and simple, sometimes a lot more needs to be done than this. This is just a selfish inward action whenever some things like this happen. You need outward action. Physical and tangible action to help some people. Let me know your thoughts about this. I almost am scared to ask, but I want to know what you feel. Leave it in the comments. Cover Killer Nation. Take care.